My resume is patchy. Like really patchy. Like an ambitious 16-year-old trying to grow a beard patchy. Don't get me wrong, it's full of jobs, but none of them are linked. Pizza chef, theater hand, selling jewelry, picking grapes. But this patchy resume has somehow led me to my current job, and I'll explain what that is later in the video, but before we get there, we've got to rewind. I'm gonna tell you 5 stories from 5 different jobs, and they won't seem linked at first, but I promise it'll all make sense in the end. And just before we dive into the video, a quick shout out from my first ever sponsor. It's a pretty relevant sponsor, it's Seek Career Advice, but more on them later in the video. Alrighty, let's dive right in. Story 1, Squids. I'll set the scene. I'm a 10-year-old and I'm reading a book about the sea in bed. And I get to this one page and it is the most horrifying image that my young self had ever seen. A giant squid pulling down a pirate ship into the ocean. I immediately screamed and threw the book onto the other side of the room. And so was born my lifelong fear of squids. Fast forward 10 years and I'm 20. Now I'm 20 and I'm getting my first ever kitchen job. It's in Bathurst, New South Wales at this Thai restaurant. And I rock up on my first day. I get into the kitchen and the chef gives me my first task. It is 4 big Tupperware containers full of squids. And he explains that it's my job to grab a squid, peel its skin off, throw away the skin, and put that squid into a new bucket. Now, I know that the squid has it the worst in this situation, but I have it the second worst. This, for me, would be like the equivalent of an arachnophobe having to manhandle tarantulas for cash. But you know what? I took that breath, my friends. I took a deep, deep breath, and I switched off, and I did it. Hell yeah! That's right. I'm scared of nothing. I'm scared of a lot of things. Eventually all these buckets go from being full of squids to having no squids at all, and I go from being terrified of squids to being slightly less terrified of squids. Over the years I've worked heaps of different kitchen jobs, but no day would ever compare to day 1. The day that taught me that I could face my single biggest fear on this planet and come out the other side fine. Story 2. Ads. I used to work in advertising, which is a really strange industry. Now granted, there were a lot of things I didn't like about that industry, but there was one thing I loved. Your creativity was not put on a pedestal. There was no luxury of writer's block. When I first started working in the creative department, my creative director, who's the guy above me, would hand me a brief and say, give me 50 ways to solve this. Previously, I was used to creativity being like, here's one problem and here's the solution, as opposed to here is 50 solutions to the one problem, and that blew my mind in the best way possible. So next in the process, what you do with those 50 ideas, you distill them down to 4 really good ideas and you put them in a deck for a pitch. So that gets pitched to your client, and then all of those 4 ideas will get just torn to shreds. On the good fortune that one of these ideas will make it to the light of day, it will be so unrecognizable from whatever it is that you pitched. And the credit, if there is any, will go to whoever owns the agency. Even so, there is still a part of you that is just so stoked to have made anything at all. Until you read the comments. Silence, Brand. Got him. How do you do, fellow kids? Got him. Ugh, got him. What it taught me is that creativity and ideas aren't special. They're not exclusive to anybody. What is special is being able to be consistently creative despite constant setbacks. Story 3. Lamb. My partner Felicity and I lived in Minneapolis for 3 months, and we were so broke, man. We didn't have any money, so we'd spend most of our time on Craigslist looking for jobs. And the most common job that came up was cleaning hoarder houses. There was this one time we were cleaning this house, and it was pretty heartbreaking. So imagine every single surface, and it's covered with like shampoo bottles, like old newspapers, and just sheet plastic. It's all really very confronting to see hoarding that up close and personal, and it just kind of tears you apart a little. It was quite sad. And there was a moment, it was a bit later in the day, I think the sun was setting, and I was in the kitchen and I was just doing all the various kind of kitchen cleaning. Like I'm getting rid of like 20 used sponges and packets of unused disposable cutlery. And I feel this presence behind me, you know, and you can just kind of feel that there's someone behind you. And I turn around and it's the lady who owns the house and her daughter, and they are holding a butcher's knife. And I was like, oh, well, this is it then. I'm in America, I've read the news, I know what happens. And I was like, what's going on? And then they're like, hey, and I'm like, hey. And then they pull out this big bloody piece of meat. And I'm like, is that Felicity? And then they're just like, would you cook this lamb for us? And I was like, yes, yeah. I will. I'll start cooking the lamb and I keep cleaning the kitchen, and then they asked me, they're like, hey, would you and Felicity stay for dinner with us? And I'm like, Yeah, sure. So me and Fliss sit down to eat with them and we have this gorgeous dinner. And I realized in that moment that we were equal parts cleaners as we were company. And sometimes the things in people's heads that can lead to hoarding are also the same things that can lead to loneliness. And it felt nice to know that we could, I don't know, at least for that day, provide some sort of temporary relief to both of those things. Story 4, golf carts. There's a different energy between making money and making money when you're desperate. And if you've ever been like super broke, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. So as interesting as cleaning the hoarder houses was, it didn't pay too well. We were kind of just existing, you know what I mean? Like you get some money and then you'd have to spend it on, you know, like annoying things like feeding yourself. I found myself at the age of 24 with $11. I was stuck in Minneapolis and I had no way to get home to Australia. Then I see this one out on Craigslist that says looking for golf cart taxi drivers for Arizonan Country Music Festival. Yeehaw. For 4 days in the hot Arizona sun, I had to drive a golf cart around a music festival called Country Thunder USA. We were taxis, and it was our job to drive these people from their cornhole and caravans to Jamie Lynn Spears. For every seat in my golf cart that I filled, I got $3 plus tips. The first $2,000 that I'd make would go to the company that hired the golf cart taxis, and then every dollar after that, I would keep. Here's the catch though, if I made less than $2,000, I would owe the company. Given that my net worth was $11, this was a pretty big risk. But Felicity and I worked 4 20-hour days in a row, and by the end, yeah, man, we made like a couple grand. It was sweet, and that's sweet USD, baby. What I learned is, well, firstly I learned that Americans are so good at having fun. It's ridiculous, man. I kind of fell in love with them. But what I learned more in a job sense is that risk is often correlated to reward, and that big risk paid off. Hell yeah. With the money that we had earned from the festival, me and Fliss were able to finally buy our ticket home. Story 5, needles. When I was 26, I nearly died in a surfing accident, and that made me kind of question a lot of things in my life. The big one was, what the hell am I doing? And the more I asked that question, the more I was inclined to follow my dreams. Yay! And the biggest dream that I had sitting in the back of my head was I wanted to be a tattoo artist. So I went to my favorite tattoo shop in Newcastle and I said, hello, I'd like an apprenticeship, please. And after a lot of back and forth, the beautiful couple who worked there gave me an apprenticeship. I felt like the luckiest human on planet Earth. Of course, the tattoo studio was up 2 flights of stairs and I was on crutches, so I had to like kind of get my way up every single morning. And that was kind of funny, I guess, looking back on it. The thing that struck me as interesting about tattooing was that you didn't make money unless you had somebody to tattoo. And those people who wanted tattoos, they weren't guaranteed, but they always came. There was always somebody else to tattoo. As long as you had faith that you could blindly fall forward, knowing that there would be customers on the other side, you'd be fine. And this was cool because it made me realize that all jobs are this way. You know, I think some people see like freelancing and tattooing as vulnerable because you don't know when the next paycheck's coming, but what I realized is that every job is vulnerable. If you work an employee job, you could get fired tomorrow. You could also get hit by a bus. That'd suck. But yeah, as I learned the craft of putting needles into skin to make pretty pictures, the thing that really stuck out to me was, have a little faith, you know? Basically, I learned that opportunities are like buses. If you miss one, bummer. But there's always another one coming. So those are my 5 stories. Now these 5 stories, like I said, might seem like blips on a patchy resume, but they're linked. They all in some way taught me a skill that I use now in my current job. And the job that I do have now is one of those typical like slash careers. You know, the ones that are really hard to explain to your grandparents. In more concrete terms, I run 2 businesses, an apparel company and an animation studio. I do online stuff like this and I freelance. What looked like a series of random and unrelated jobs actually turned me into the perfect candidate for what I do now. If this video were to take a slightly more corporate tone, a little bit more business casual, this is probably how I'd put it. Peeling squids taught me confidence. Advertising taught me resilience. Cleaning hoarder houses taught me interpersonal skills. Golf cart taxi driving taught me financial management. And tattooing taught me optimism. I feel like all the weird things on my patchy resume are the Planeteers, and my job is Captain Planet, rising out with that glorious mullet. It's kind of like when Scott Adams said he wasn't the funniest guy and he wasn't the best artist, but when he put them together, he got Dilbert. I made this video because I think that there is a long-standing and slightly unhealthy narrative that there is only one good type of resume. You know, where you work 5 years at this job and then 5 years at this similar but slightly different job? And if that's you, all power to you. This isn't a dig. And there are definitely some industries that accept no less. You know, teaching, engineering, being a doctor, really good jobs. But if you haven't built that type of resume, all power to you as well. Not everybody gets a good start in life, not everybody moves at the same pace, and it can feel hard to break in. But thanks to this cool internet paradigm shift, there are now increasingly more industries that value life experience over work experience. What I prefer measuring is not what you've done, but what you've learned. If your resume is full of consistent jobs, you might have learned how to be amazing in that industry. And if your resume is inconsistent with a bunch of unconventional gaps, you might have learned how to be adaptable, resourceful, and curious. All the stuff that you'd need in this rapidly changing world. So those are my thoughts for careers for people who feel like they're a bit late to the career game. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, and I'll link it back quite relevantly to this video's sponsor. If you do want to know how to put your skills to work to do the work that you love, check out Seek Career Advice. I'll put the link in the description. I can guarantee that you're more skilled than you know. Seriously. Thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciate you sticking to the end as well. Let me know what you got out of this in the comments, and do subscribe if you are new. I make videos like this every week. Good luck with career endeavors and trying to synthesize what you've learned over your lifetime, and have a gorgeous day. Catch ya.